My name's Adrian Cunnington, and I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about CIPC Stewardship. I'm a member of the Stewardship group and head up the technical working group on the CIPC Stewardship program. And I want to give you an update of the position on stewardship as it is at the moment. And many of you will be aware that we've had a review of CIPC stewardship this year. So I'm going to say a little bit about that to start with. First, a question for you. What number comes next? Answer: any number other than, as long as it's less than 10 mgs per kilo. Okay, those numbers are up there, have been the exceedance figures that we've had so far. We've had 7 MRL exceedances since CIPC stewardship began, and that's 7 exceedances too many. So, as I mentioned, the CIPC stewardship program has been reviewed by the Advisory Committee on Pesticides, and that's the body which asked for stewardship to be put into place 5 years ago, and they made their review. They were very concerned that MRL exceedances are still occurring, but have agreed to continue the approval of CIPC, subject to a number of actions which have got to be delivered on. So we need more data from the approval holders to support the CIPC label, so that very much falls into their camp. We need further evidence about the factors affecting residues. They would like some comparison with the systems that are being used elsewhere in Europe, because we're going to be moving to a European regime in 2017. They want us to continue our industry residue sampling, but to do that in a way that replicates the official sampling that takes place, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And there's additional information been requested to go with those industry residues on crop factors, history information, treatment information, etc., just so that we can build up a picture. Let's just rewind a bit, thinking about the importance of CIPC. It is the most used sprout suppressant on stored potatoes. We're treating around 1.8 million tons of potatoes in store, most of the processing crop, but also quite a lot of fresh market crop is treated. There are no suitable alternatives currently for many businesses. 1 or 2 new products coming onto the market, but principally CIPC is still the only option for processing, and we have the MRL of 10 mgs per kilo in place. So this is how we're using it in these types of stores. We've got at the top a box store, at the bottom we've got a large-scale bulk store, and we're fogging it in using a thermal fogging process. Stewardship. The ACP first raised their concerns in the end of 2007. The stewardship process came in 2008 and had cross-industry representation. We've had 19 stewardship group meetings to date, and we've set up some subgroups. I mentioned the technical working group that I'm involved with. We're working across the industry to establish best practice, and we have an important role to play in liaison with the UK regulators, and I'd like to point out that Fiona Fisher from CRD is in the audience today, so welcome, Fiona. The 5-year action plan that we've had in place was started in 2008, had a number of different components, which I won't go through in detail at the moment because I'm going to come back to those, but in 2013, in addition to the review, we've had a significant commitment made by industry to continue stewardship, and we've launched the new CIPC Compliant campaign, which you can see on the stand opposite the auditorium when you leave. So those components of that stewardship plan include communication to users. A wide variety of different methods have been used, but in communicating to users, we're talking to the people who come to events like this. I think the important point to make is that there is still a significant proportion of the industry that don't come to meetings like this, and we need them to get the message as well. And so it is important, if you are discussing CIPC use with your neighbours, that you talk to them as well, particularly if you're aware that they're not necessarily up to date with best practice, because it could be them that creates the exceedance that causes a problem in the future. There's been a significant investment in R&D during the stewardship period, over £2 million of industry investment, covering a number of different topics. We've had some good success in bulk stores, but the uptake of the techniques which we've researched is still needs to continue, and we've got a display on the Sutton Bridge stand about use of inverters, so we would like to see that taken up more for bulk stores in particular, but also in box stores, although we are also looking at alternative solutions in some of the current research work that we're carrying out. Alternatives to CIPC are coming through. There are one or two products that are going to be available in the midterm, which will certainly help the situation, but won't necessarily be direct replacements for CIPC. One thing we do know is that the use of CIPC vapor is not a solution. We had a industry-funded project on that, and that unfortunately wasn't successful, and we don't think is a route that we can go down. The use of improved airflow and store temperature control using inverter systems has worked well in bulk stores, and I'm pleased to see the level of uptake that we've had on that so far, but as I've mentioned, I'd like to see it continue. And the other major impact of the stewardship campaign is the more controlled use of CIPC that we've been able to introduce through a number of different initiatives. They're listed on this slide. A lot of different things which have come through as a result of stewardship and industry sitting down and finding ways that we can tighten up on the CIPC application process. You need to be familiar with these if you're using CIPC. It is important that we have everybody complying with these controls, and the most recent one of those has been the introduction of the store checklist, which is now a critical failure point on the red tractor scheme. So if you're using CIPC, this form needs to be filled in, and it needs to be filled in before you use CIPC. So this is essentially getting you to do a self-assessment of your store's suitability for the use of CIPC. There will be other options coming along, and we've got a store check process which we're promoting on the Potato Council stand today and tomorrow, which you may want to look at as a next stage on from this. We've also been doing some assessment of the uptake of best practice through the Red Tractor scheme. Red Tractor covers around about 80% of the crop, and we've been looking in liaison with the audit process in Red Tractor at how well that uptake has been going through. So we've asked some questions. Are you CIPC compliant? And in each case, we've pretty much got around about 80%, about 4 out of 5 growers complying with best practice. But it's that 5th grower that is the real worry. And these are the people within Red Tractor as well. So there's still another 20% of people outside Red Tractor that are not in there. So we need people to be completing the store checklist, which I think is the one on the left there, and making sure that they've got recommendations from basis advisors, which is on the left here, which has still got a few people not getting that. And are their contractors members of the NAAC applicator scheme? Only about 4 out of 5 there as well. So we need people to be using contractors who are familiar with the best practice, and that really comes through the NAAC scheme. The other aspect of stewardship that has been very important is the industry data submission that's been going alongside the official surveillance work that's done by the pesticide residues in food committee. They take data on a random basis. It's reviewed each quarter, and this is where the exceedances come through. So if they find an exceedance, that gets published as part of the PRIF data. Somewhat exceptionally, I think, the stewardship group have been invited to audit stores where we have had exceedances. And this is something which I've been involved with. And we've, as I've mentioned previously, we've had 7 exceedances in the last... Does it stop working for some reason? Oops, no, there we are. And I'll talk about the exceedances in a second, but the first point I want to make here is that we're getting better at putting CIPC on. The majority of you, that blue line that you can see riding from the left to the right, it's got a big bump in it at the start, but let's ignore that. The general trend is upward. We're putting more CIPC on. The important point is we're not changing our practices as we do it sufficiently. And so that's why we're running into issues with exceedances on the right-hand side of this graph. We're putting more on, but then we're not changing our practice in terms of whether we go back with a second dose or a third dose or whatever the issue is. So it is important that we understand that as we get better at putting the chemical on, we need to be able to change the practices as well. These are the exceedances that we've seen, and you can see that there's a trend towards box storage, and box storage is more complicated in that we don't have what we call positive ventilation, so we can't circulate fog through the potatoes to the same extent as we can in bulk stores. And we've also seen quite a lot of instances within the exceedances of these occurring in fresh markets. So cold temperature stores, basically. Some of the learnings from those audits: good relationships between the applicator and the grower, but the grower not understanding his responsibility in terms of having responsibility for the crop. We cannot hand over responsibility just to a contractor. It's the same as if you were putting a blight spray on in the field. You still are responsible for that crop. So you need to make sure that everything is done correctly. You need sign-off by a basis advisor, and that we found that to be inadequate in some of the instances that we've looked at. We need the records and communication to be good, and that's been lacking in a few places. We need to get rid of problems like temperature gradients in store where we're fogging. We need to be able to eliminate those temperature gradients before the fog goes on. It's no good just turning the fridge off when the guy with the CIPC fogging equipment arrives on site. Needed some preparation. We need to be able to ensure that we're putting the CIPC onto the crop when it's in its most uniform state. We've had some problems with chain of custody, where crops have moved off farm into other ownership, perhaps to a merchant. We've identified that there's not been sufficient information travelling with the crop, and so we need to make sure that that is tightened up. And we also need to make sure that some of the stores receive some attention, so prior to CIPC use, particularly in relation to air leakage. Bottom line is, we need to do things, we need to act to avoid further exceedances. We cannot continue to have these problems. And this season, as many of you will be aware, we have had some label changes, and these have been proactively added as part of the stewardship process to make sure that we try and tighten up on some of the weaker areas. Now, the first one is the timing of the first application. We need that to go on early, so we maximise the scope for CIPC to be successful. The second point is in relation to cold stores. When we put CIPC into a cold store, it doesn't decline as rapidly as it will in a processing store. It's a temperature-dependent decline. And therefore, when we've got CIPC in a cold store, it's going to last longer. And so it is important that we get it on effectively to start with, and it distributes better if we put it on when the temperature's a little bit warmer. So that's why we've been advocating application during pull down. And once it's down there, we really don't want to go back in with CIPC again. So that's one dose of CIPC is sufficient to control sprouting. We've just got to get it into the right places. And so we come back to the issue of distribution. Distribution is enhanced significantly by using ventilation to move the CIPC around the store. And wherever we can do that positively, then that is a bonus. And a lot of data to suggest that positive ventilation is the best way forward, and that's recommended in all store types. But I accept that many of our overhead throw box stores are not in a situation where we can do that yet. But as I've said in the R&D slide, we are working on solutions to be able to do that. So in summary, returning to the ACP, that review from the regulator perspective, there is continuing approval for CIPC products in the UK. There is the concern about exceedances, and we do need to provide additional data. We need to make sure that we are better and more accurately record residues within industry as well, which is makes the data more directly comparable with the official surveillance. And from the industry perspective, we need to commit, and we need everybody to commit to ongoing stewardship. We need people to follow best practice through the CIPC Compliant campaign. The approval holders will do their bit in supplying data. We need to continue to find solutions for low temperature stores, because we're aware that the solutions we have are only going part way so far, and we need that industry monitoring to make sure that we're doing a good job. So I think that's at that point I will stop and ask if there are any questions. Thank you.